In this session, I'd like to take a brief break from our studies on modes and look at the strong relationship between major and minor scales. Along the way, I'd also like to introduce you to two very easy scales that you can use to improvise or construct bass lines with. So let's get started. So far we've been learning about the modes of the major scale, and to date we've explored Ionian, which is the major scale, Dorian, the second mode, Mixolydian, which is the fifth mode, and more recently the Aeolian mode. For today though, we'll be concentrating solely on Ionian and Aeolian, and as we've been doing so far, we'll base all our learning in the key of C major. Now, staying with the concept of keys within music, here's a very important fact that you should know. Every major key has a relative minor key. And all this means is that we can look at music from two directions, either major or minor. Okay, on its own it sounds a little more confusing than it actually is, so let me explain. If we take the C major scale for example, we know that it doesn't contain any sharps or flats. See, they're all natural notes. And in an earlier lesson, when we encountered key signatures for the first time, we learned that every major scale was, in fact, its own key signature. So, quite clearly, the scale of C major is in the key of C major. But as we've just learned, this major key also has a relative minor key. So how do we go about working this out? Okay, luckily for us, this is very easy to do. To work out the relative minor of any major key, all we have to do is find the sixth note. And it's that simple. So let's give it a try. So, counting up through C major, the sixth note, as you should know by now, is an A. And piecing this all together, the relative minor to the key of C major is A minor. Taking a G major scale for example, we can use the instrument to count up to the sixth note. And from this we now know that the relative minor to G major is E minor. Now this relativity exists because both scales are constructed from the same series of notes. And when played as a scale from either the major root note, in this case a C, there's a strong and very distinct major tonality going on. Hear how this series of notes instinctively leads our ear back to the root note again. However, by playing the same series of notes, but this time starting on an A, which is the root note of the relative minor, this time we hear a strong minor tonality. Notice now how our ear is brought naturally back through the minor scale and round to the root note again. So going back to our minor scale, in this case B minor, you'll be pleased to hear that this relationship works in the other direction. So this time we can use it to find out any minor's relative major key. Okay, to work out the relative major of any minor key, all we look for is the minor third. So, recalling any one of our shapes for a minor third on the fingerboard, the minor third of B minor is a D. And putting all this together, we find that the relative major of B minor is quite simply D major. Something I suggest you do is use these simple rules to work out all of the relative major and minor keys. Obviously, this is going to take some time, but I think it's worth it and serves as a really good way of better understanding how chord sequences actually function. As you get more familiar with these relative major and minor keys, and of course their associated scales, you'll soon begin to see and hear how lots of songs out there move or cadence between these major and minor key centres. And this alone is a very simple yet really powerful technique that's been used by composers the world over. So, to get you understanding and using this newfound relativity in music, I'd like to introduce you to something called the pentatonic scale. As we've just expanded our knowledge about major and minor keys, let's now have a look at this new scale, or to be precise, two new scales, the major pentatonic scale and its relative minor pentatonic scale. These pentatonic scales are an important part of any musician's toolbox and are more commonly introduced early on, but I personally find them more beneficial introduced a little later in our studies, when you can fully appreciate how they're constructed and how they can be used. Okay, they get their name pentatonic from the Greek word penta, which means 5, and the Latin word tonicus, which means note. So, as you can already guess, we're dealing with a scale made up of only 5 notes, pentatonic. So taking the major pentatonic scale first, the easiest way to create this is to start with a full major scale. Let's take C major for example. And just leave out the 4th and 7th notes, which are the F and the B. Removing these notes leaves us with our 5 different tones, or a major pentatonic scale. In this case, the notes C, D, E, G, and A. And as we started from the note of C, we'd simply refer to this as a C major pentatonic scale. I like to remember the overall sound of a major pentatonic scale as the main melodic hook from the Temptations song My Girl. And this Motown classic is proof of the scale's inherent musicality. So, here are a couple of shapes you can use to spell out a major pentatonic scale on the bass. The first starts on the 2nd finger and is based around our original major scale shape. So going up to the octave and missing out the 4th and 7th notes, we have C, D, E, G, A, and onto the octave C. And running the sequence in reverse sounds like this. Okay, that first shape only allows you to cross the fingerboard and prohibits any movement up the neck. So here's another shape you can use for any major pentatonic scale and is based around the other major scale shape we learned. Starting again from a C, this time we fret it with the index finger like this. From here we play the first 3 notes on the same string as with any major scale, so C, D, E, and then move up a string to play the G and A. Up another string from the A finds you back on the octave C. I particularly like this shape as it really helps the scale to flow up the neck and take some time to experiment with your fingering so the scale feels effortless to play. As you can see, you can slide up the neck between the 2nd and 3rd notes, and this allows you to play the scale using just your index and 3rd fingers, but importantly, work on what feels right for you. As with the major scale, it's always a good idea to extend the major pentatonic scale beyond a 1-octave range, and this second shape really allows you to do this with relative ease, so please spend some time practicing this. Okay, that's a major pentatonic scale, and as we've already learned, every major has a relative minor. So, as we've just looked at a C major pentatonic scale, its relative minor would be, think for a second, so C is our root note, and counting up to the 6th note, C, D, E, F, G, A. So, C major pentatonic's relative minor scale would be the A minor pentatonic scale. So let's check it out on the bass. As with the major pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic scale can be thought of as basically the Aeolian modal natural minor scale, with the 2nd and 6th notes missing. So, starting on the root note of A and missing out these notes, we can quite easily piece together an A minor pentatonic scale. Play with me now as I demonstrate this scale. So from our root note A, we go up a minor third on the same string to a C. From here we move up a string to play the notes D and E like this. Then up another string to finish the scale off by playing G, and then back to the octave A. Here's the sequence again, up and down. Okay, as always, here's another shape you can use to spell out any minor pentatonic scale. Again, we'll start from an A, so we'll be playing an A minor pentatonic scale. During this, notice the obvious overlap of the major pentatonic shape as we play up the neck, and this really confirms the close bond between major and minor, and reinforces the whole concept of relativity between major and minor keys. So, from the root note A, we're going to move up a string by a minor third to the C played here like this. From here, continue on this string to play the notes D and E, and then finish the scale as before, fretting the notes of G and A on the next string up. What I'd like you to work on before the next session is really getting to grips with both these major and minor pentatonic shapes across the neck. Try playing them in as many different keys as you can, and this can only help you get more familiar with each major key's relative minor and vice versa. As you begin to get more fluent with the scales, try and create some melodic ideas, bass lines, or just have a go at improvising. In the meantime, enjoy creating music, and I'll see you soon.